I'd like to call up Cameron McNeill, the Senior Clinical Site Manager, Global Clinical Science and Operations for UCB.
Thanks, Dr. Chen. Hey, y'all. Nice to meet everybody. My name's Cameron McNeill, and just like a lot of the other speakers, I have to say it's really humbling to be in front of all of you. I mean, the fact that you've taken the time on top of your life working with a chronic illness and then come here and do all this and put all this together, it's crazy. So I grew up playing in a lot of like punk and hardcore bands. You know, the hair, I get it. So I'm usually used to, when I'm on a stage, a lot more violence, loudness. So if I seem nervous in this environment, it's because I am. So please forgive me. But in those communities, there's a lot about self-advocacy, community advocacy, doing things yourself. And this is a representation of that in a way that matters so much. So it's so cool. I'm so stoked on this, and you guys make me really hopeful for a lot of things, not just MOG, but just a lot of things in general. Really quick question. I'm assuming green is forward. Okay, wonderful. So I'm a clinical site manager, and I'm assuming you guys probably don't know what I do, but there's two main roles in my job. So I work directly for the sponsor, the pharmaceutical company who makes the investigational drug. The first part of my job is to basically find the sites to do our clinical research. So I go to the site, I interview the doctors. I did this here with Dr. Flanagan. It was difficult because Dr. Shalema kept pole vaulting over us while I was here. It was very distracting. But what we do is we go in and we talk to the physicians. We make sure that they have the expertise to work on the trial, the staff to handle the trial. We look at equipment, we look at their pharmacies. We basically do a full review to make sure that they're going to be able to conduct the trial. Then while the trial is ongoing, I come back at different intervals to look at the data. So currently on the CosMOG trial, I'm looking at 100% of the collected data. So that means that every single thing that they record about you, I come in and I look at in a de-identified way. I don't know who the participant is, I just see numbers. But I come in and I look at all of that data, I compare it to our research protocol, and I make sure that they've done everything right per the research, as well as just basic, patient care. If they brought up a problem, did you address it? If they had any issues with lab tests, have those been reviewed? Things like that. So I want to talk a little bit about the CosMOG trial in a way that's maybe more patient-focused. So, industry partners or physicians or anything, hopefully I could speak to y'all later, but hopefully I'm going to try to address some things that the patients might care about. So the purpose of this study is to understand how well tolerated and how effective our study drug is. We call it rozimab, which is short for rozanolixizumab, which is horrible to say. So rozimab is currently approved for myasthenia gravis. That's another autoimmune disease. So we have a significant amount of data about safety and efficacy in that population, but we're looking more into the MOG population now. So throughout all of your stories, it's pretty obvious that nobody here has the same diagnostic story. And I think a lot of patients that have MOG don't have similar diagnostic stories or, journeys as a lot of people with a lot of other diseases. There's a lot of complication and nuance and scariness, and we know that. So that's been reflected as much as we possibly could within this trial protocol, as well as people like me. So part of my job is to also, hear from the physicians and from study coordinators, what are some pain points, what are participants going through, and what can we as the sponsor help with? So I'll try to highlight some ways that we do that as I walk through this. I don't have anything else to talk about here. Let's keep going. So I don't want to harp too much on this. I think we all know that this is an autoimmune disease. Your body has antibodies, and those become improperly targeted to individual parts of you. But what our drug does is it kind of it's thought to interrupt this pathway. So within your body, you have antibodies that are targeting your myelin. And what our drug does is it interferes with the recycling process. So there's another protein in your body that binds to these antibodies, and it basically labels them for protection so that your body can't eliminate them. So those antibodies become recycled and they stay in your system. And what our drug is thought to do is to block that recycling protein. So that's kind of the concept. So we're not interacting directly with the antibody itself. We're trying to mess up the pathway so that the antibody can be removed naturally. So talking about what you'd experience on the study. So quick show of hands, how many people have ever been in a clinical trial? Family members too, anybody? You, I know. You, so, okay, so a small amount of people, honestly, I'm a little surprised. So in a clinical trial, particularly just speaking towards ours, what you would do is you'd come in for a screening period. And I want to touch on the self-advocacy part of this here really quick. This is an opportunity for you to go into a physician who's usually an expert about the illness. This goes for most clinical trials, but especially for ours. So you go in, you talk to somebody who is an expert, and you can ask questions. You're going to learn about your disease. You are going to have a platform and a vehicle for you to advocate for yourself. So I think that's a great first step. And the best thing about a clinical trial is it's predicated on your consent. So you go in, and if they tell you something that you don't want to hear or something that you're not familiar with or makes you feel uncomfortable, you do not have to move any further at all in the trial. At any time in any trial, you can withdraw your consent, and you can come right off, and you'll be right back to where you were. Obviously, if we need to provide any sort of, safety aftercare, that would be done as well, but that's kind of the concept. So you come in for a screening period. For our study, what that looks like is some MRIs, OCTs. We look at visual fields, some tests that you're probably familiar with already. But we would look at those things, and we'd look at previous con meds, your history with the disease, and we'd confirm if you are, eligible for our trial. Once you do that, you would be randomized. So what that means is usually some sort of computer program or algorithm splits you up in between the two study groups. So that would be a placebo group and then the drug group. So it's 50-50. And really quick, this is a subcutaneous infusion, similar to a lot of the other drugs that we talked about today. It's done in infusion on your abdomen, on your belly, and it takes roughly 15 minutes. And these are weekly infusions. After the double-blind treatment period, all participants can move into an open-label extension. So if you're in the double-blind period, double-blind, you might have heard a lot of people say that today. If you're unaware of what that means, it means that nobody knows what drug you are on or if you're on the placebo. So your physician doesn't know, we as the sponsor don't know. No one is aware of this, and the purpose of that is to kind of eliminate any bias. So if I was with a company and I was not such a good person, I could look at the data for the drug user if I knew it and say, oh yeah, so-and-so, they look great. They're doing so good. But if I don't know that, it eliminates that ability for me to do that. So it's just something to kind of keep the faith in the science of the study. But yeah, after the double-blind period, you're able to enter it into an open-label extension, which means everybody in that portion is on the study drug. So everybody who enters our study has an opportunity to get the study drug. 2 months after your last dose, there's a little bit of a safety follow-up that you would go to too, maybe some lab tests, some different things that you'd be used to by that point. So these are our three main inclusion criteria. So it's for participants who are between 18 and 89 years old. They have relapsing MOGAD. So that means you would have had some sort of initial attack and then a period of time and then another attack. And then that would be your initial relapse. And you would have had to have been diagnosed roughly within a year. We are looking for these three symptoms that we discussed ad nauseum today. I think you guys know about them, especially the MOG population. So if you have optic neuritis, transverse myelitis, or ADEM, you have to have one of those criteria. There are other eligibility criteria that I'm not going to explain here, but if you want to talk afterwards, you could talk to me, Dr. Flanagan, Dr. Chin, any of these folks, and they can help you walk through that. We also have some pamphlets over here at our table with Danielle. She can talk to you as well. So you can learn a little bit more about the inclusion and exclusion criteria for the protocol. This is where our study sites are. We have a study site that's right here. We have sites all across the US and in Europe and a few in Japan and Korea. Some in Australia and then also in South and Central America. Just really quick, our sites here in the US. Really quick before I finish up, does anybody have any questions? Is there anything that I could explain a little better or any clinical trial questions? I know you had a question. I know you had one. You were ready for the CosMOG one.
Yes, I am. Okay, so if I want to explore the CosMOG trial, I would let my neurologist know that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you could also do this yourself. I would recommend talking to Dr. Flanagan. I'm not sure where you're geographically located, but I could help you out with a little map of sites, and we could help point you to a person who would then be able to talk to you about the protocol and set you up potentially for a screening visit based on, your presentation.
I'm in Northern California, and I believe Dr. Hahn from Stanford was doing it previously. I don't know if she still is or not.
If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Hahn still is doing the trial. And we also have a site in Arizona. I know that's much farther away. But really quick, I just want to add a couple things here. So as you were looking at that map, I'm sure some of you are from different parts of the US and you're wondering, like, how is it that I can participate in this trial? Because we know the complexity of living with the MOG study, we have done a few things on this trial to make it easier for people to participate. And one of those is a group called JMAC. They are a third party that we utilize to help to bring people into the trial. What they do is they help plan for travel. So they can help you book flights, book hotels, rent cars, get taxi service, things like that. Jim, if he's still here, I can't see anybody because of the lights, but Jim.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. So talk to Jim about that. I mean, I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this story, but this was a very interesting case. I have never once seen this on a single clinical trial in my time doing this. We helped to relocate him every week in between Arizona and Boston for almost a year. And that obviously is a huge undertaking for him, but the purpose of things like JMAC is to make it easier for people to participate in the trial, because we're recognizing that not only are you traveling, you may be doing it with limited vision or limited cognitive function or without a caregiver. So a lot of these things have been thought of and placed into the study. And any other questions? Do you have a microphone? No? You want me to come down?
I have two questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Have a million.
So the first one is as far as the double-blind study, like getting the placebo, can you explain the fear that might go along with that individuals might feel receiving a placebo? And then question number 2 is, do you have an at-home option for people that might not be at a location close to one of your facilities?
You were studying my notes before I came up here, because those are
Absolutely.
the things I was supposed to talk about that I forgot to talk about. Okay,
I forgot to mention and start that I taught school a really long time, so I was just testing you.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so the first thing that you had asked was, the fear about taking a placebo, and that's totally understood. I mean, this is an issue within clinical trials that are double-blind and randomized, is that it is very hard to kind of assuage this fear of, I have this relapsing condition and you're telling me that I'm going to be on salt water. That is scary. So within our study, and I think this is one of the best things about having weekly visits, is you are being looked at probably more closely than you ever have been throughout any illness you have had if you are coming into this trial. So not only are you being seen weekly by a physician, your information that we're collecting about you and about your disease progression is not only being reviewed by your physician. So for example, let's say you were going to Dr. Flanagan. Dr. Flanagan would be reviewing your information, but we also have centralized review of several different tests in our study. So we are centrally reviewing all MRI results, all OCT results, and all ECGs that are collected. On top of that, if and when you do relapse, not only is your study physician looking at that information, you are being sent over, your data is being sent over to an adjudication committee that is also headed by third-party physicians not involved in the trial. And these people help to determine if you are having a true or a pseudo relapse, as we talked about earlier. So I understand that it's scary, and I probably can't help tell you to not be scared about not taking a medication for a disease that's really impacting you, but I can promise you that there is so much oversight that is happening while you are part of the study that if anything occurs, we're able to catch it early and treat it comprehensively, not just with one physician's opinion, but with the opinion of multiple physicians who are experts in this field. The second thing that you had mentioned to me was, is there an option for home dosing? Some sites do have home dosing. I'd say most of our US sites are using home dosing. So what that would mean is that you would go for your first 4 visits. So you'd go roughly for your first 4 weeks of visits. And then after that, we would set you up with a home care team. You can do this on either the double-blind portion or the open-label extension portion. We would send 2 nurses to your home. One would prepare the drug, and one would ask you some questions and administer it. On top of that, at each of these visits, you will be being contacted by somebody on your study team. So it's not just going to be these 2 people who you haven't met before. A study coordinator, a nurse, or a physician, somebody who you've worked with previously on the study team will contact you at each of these visits, check in on you, ask about relapses, and just, take an overall look at how you're doing. And then you'd be able to get the study drug in your home, and you would only have to come back to the trial site, like the physical location, every 3 months-ish, roughly. Am I correct about that?
That's right. Yep.
Perfect.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, of course.
This is on behalf of a fellow Mogster. So, travel cost, if you choose to go to a location, is that covered by the patient or is that covered by the trial industry?
So we have, like I said, JMAC is this group that we work with, and they also work for reimbursements. So that there's planned reimbursements for all types of travel. If you need to stay at a hotel or you need to get a flight, JMAC will work with you to ensure that that flight will be covered by us. So that it's, the goal really is to eliminate the financial burden of participating in a trial like this. It's a weekly visit. Like, we understand that this is a big commitment. So that's the reason why JMAC exists. And they'll work with you look at Jim. Talk to Jim. If you guys want to know about how much we're willing to do to help, he's a great representative of that.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
I have an online question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I think Owen's giving.
Well,
There's one person here.
I think he's got somebody first. Yes, let's let them go. You go. You.
Hi. So for both of these experimental drugs, the requirement is that the patient has already relapsed. Why is that?
so that's a great question. And Dr. Flanagan, I think you would be a better person to answer that than me. Well, I'll leave the medical questions to the medical folks.
I think that the concern is that some people, if 50% of people will never relapse, then exposing them to the risks of the medication may be too much. So the trials, when they designed them, decided to wait until somebody had relapsed. Now, I think if the medications are proven to work, then we may try and identify in the future, for future trials, very high-risk patients or people who have not recovered well, and maybe they would be candidates for the medication after the first attack, because really we'd like to be able to predict who are those people who are going to relapse and then get a medication. But I think to start with, they wanted to do this, and a lot of the trial design is negotiated with the FDA so that if a medication is being used in a trial, that we're not exposing people to too much risk. So they have to kind of balance those things out, I think. Yeah, but great question. Yeah.
And just to add to that, Dr. Flanagan, another reason, based on the science, so we were talking about monophasic MOG, right? So meaning you have one attack and then nothing else happens. The purpose of our study is to show that we're decreasing the amount of relapses you get over time, right? So if I wanted to make that study look really, really good, couldn't I just pick a bunch of people who I didn't think were going to ever relapse again and then point to them and say, look at how well they've been doing? It's also to make sure that we're working with the specific disease population, the relapsing population that the drug is intended to target. So that's another portion of it too.
Okay, I think this is a good segue to the follow-up question from the community, and I want to pose this both to Shervin from the satralizumab trial and to you, Cameron. The question really was a satralizumab, but it was great to answer both. So first, for you, what let's say it is FDA approved, would it be approved for first attack, or would it have to be for a relapsing patient, or would that be up to the doctor?
Let's leave that one up to Dr. Flanagan as well. I think that's another good medical question to put towards the medical professionals. Sorry about that.
I think the likelihood, I don't know for sure, but I think the likelihood is that it would only be approved for those who have relapsing disease. They usually require it to be very similar to for example, for the NMO trials, they only approved it for aquaporin 4 antibody positive and not for the negative patients, because it really was only proven to work. So they can only really prove the medication off of what the trial design was. So I think that is the likelihood, but I don't know for sure.
Would that be, maybe Shervin can weigh in, because would that be the
Yeah,
truth
so-
for that, satralizumab?
Is it working? Yeah. So actually, that's exactly why I raised my hand to also provide a response to the previous question. So I agree with Dr. Flanagan, but I think the difference here versus like AQP4 positive versus negative was, we had like a diagnostic antibody for the different conditions. Here, I think, the negotiation with FDA would be, well, if the nature of the disease for relapsing versus monophasic MOGAD is the same or not, like from a biological perspective. So I'm hopeful, even with like the current study design, we would still have a high chance of getting the label also in non-relapsing patients. I think that would be good news for the patients. And then once the drug is approved, then we will have the opportunity to collect additional data from the patients that are actually receiving the treatment. So including non-relapsing patients, and see in the real world how the drug is really working. And then, with that, even if you do not get the label at the first attempt, we will have the opportunity potentially in the future to extend the label to non-relapsing patients. So I hope that was helpful.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That's great.
Any more questions? No? Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.